And like we done all the way through, if you're unable to vote electronically, remember to raise your virtual hand and I will call you in. So I'm going to start recording now.
Okay, good evening everyone. Welcome to the meeting of the City and County of Swansea. It's 17th of March. First item on our agenda this evening is apologies for absence. Mr. Evans.
Thank you, Presiding Member. I have apologies from Councillors Joe Hale, David Helliwell, Bev Hopkins, David Hopkins, Peter Jones, Susan Jones, Miles Langston, Paul Lloyd, Alison Pugh, Jennifer Rayner and Mark Thomas.
I'm here, who?
Who's that, Alison Pugh, yet?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hugh, I'm here, David Helliwell.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Phil Downing, could you hand it, Phil?
Yeah, can I give Penny Matthews again? It doesn't look as if she's come back yet.
Yeah, thank you for that. Any other apologies? No, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Next item on the agenda is disclosures of personal and prejudicial interests. You've all had your circular from the monitoring officer, but I'll call Tracy in again. Tracy.
Thank you, Presiding Member. Just some general advice firstly. I don't consider that you have an interest in relation to the two reports relating to the Governance and Audit Committee simply on the basis that you are a member of that committee. Similarly, I don't consider that you have an interest simply on the basis that you are a member of the Pension Fund Committee in relation to the agenda item 10, which relates to the chair remuneration. Similarly, in relation to agenda item 7, the admission arrangements, I don't consider you have an interest simply on the basis that you may be a school governor. However, you might have a wellbeing interest in relation to agenda item 7 if your children or grandchildren may be directly affected by the admission arrangements. And I would remind you that those admission arrangements are for the years 2023 to 2024. So I will take a block declaration. It will only be a personal interest. So it's a personal interest under the wellbeing paragraph 10(2)(c) of the code. So can I ask any councillors who consider they have a personal interest in agenda item 7, which is the admission arrangements for 2023-2024, please to raise their virtual hand or their hand if they can't get that to function. So are there any personal interest in relation to agenda item 7?
Got Councillor Wendy Lewis. I believe Councillor Clive Lloyd's hand was up previously. Just Councillor Wendy Lewis.
Sorry, Chair. Yeah, take the admissions first. Mine was in relation to a different matter.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think we have all those in relation to agenda item 7. Are there any other declarations of interest in relation to the remainder of the agenda? Councillor Clive Lloyd.
Yeah, item 10, Presiding Member, personal and prejudicial interest, and I shall leave the meeting.
Thank you, Clive. And Mr. Ben Smith. Ben.
Thank you, Presiding Member. I have a personal interest to declare equally in item 10, but it's personal interest only because I am the Pension Fund's Section 151 officer, which has wider stakeholders. I will only be giving you advice today as your Section 151 officer. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Okay, that takes us on to then item 3, which is written responses to questions asked at the last ordinary meeting of council, pages 1 to 2. Okay, you see the response there given to Councillor Hennigan, and that's for information. Takes us to item 4, which is my announcements. And thankfully, no commiserations to start with. I would like to mention the Community Councillor Phil Crayford. Now, Phil has been the community/town representative on the Standards Committee since the 5th of October 2012. His term of office ends at the local government elections on the 5th of May. So on behalf of the council, I would like to thank Community Councillor Crayford for his work on the Standards Committee. Okay, and another announcement. very nice announcement actually, and it's in regards to the World Scout Jamboree, which is held in South Korea in 2023. I'd like to congratulate 7 Explorer Scouts from Swansea that have recently been selected to represent Wales at the 25th World Scout Jamboree in South Korea during 2023. They participate in a rigorous selection process of 250 scouts before finally being whittled down to 72 across Wales. And it so happens that our head of democratic services, Hugh Evans, is especially proud as both his children, Branwen and Gruff, are among 7 from Swansea to have been selected. So good luck to Hugh. As I said, he's very proud, but his bank balance is going to suffer. Okay, so well done, Hugh. Please pass our congratulations on to both your children, Branwen and Gruff. Amazing experience, I'm sure that will be. Okay, that concludes my announcements. Item 5 on our agenda is the announcements of the Leader of Council. Councillor Rob Stewart, please.
Thank you, Chair. The first announcement today was just to draw members' attention to the press release that our partners Skyline put out earlier this week, confirming their intention to have an attraction open on Kilvey Hill by the early part of 2025. That's a fantastic demonstration of the sort of investment that Swansea can now attract. It will see some £60 million being invested in facilities there, with obviously, as we've said before, sorry, Chair, there's a lot of interference coming back. You're able to mute. Thank you. With investment going in there for a gondola ride and a number of attractions up on Kilvey Hill, and obviously that will link very closely with the Penderyn Whisky Distillery development that is nearing completion near the Liberty Stadium. Also, some really good updates today for those who were at the conference around Blue Eden. People will know that that is the follow-on from the original Tidal Lagoon proposal, very separate, but a scheme now totaling 1.7 billion, which will see a battery manufacturing facility coming to Swansea, as well as thousands of jobs. The company today went through a number of the details there, but it is really a very, very exciting proposal for Swansea, and we anticipate a planning application being submitted to the council later this year. And then finally, just to say, obviously since we met last, there have been a number of events at the arena. We had John Bishop there earlier this week for the region conference today, which was hugely well attended, and again a real showcase of what we are now able to do in Swansea. And of course, there'll be opportunity for thousands of fans to enjoy Royal Blood on Saturday evening. On top of that, we also formally opened the new Coastal Park this week, and again the reaction to that has been hugely positive. So again, very, very grateful to the officers and all the staff who've worked so hard to get those facilities ready so that we could start to see great shows coming to Swansea. So, Chair, those are my 3 sort of initial announcements. I also wanted to draw Council's attention and take a few moments, if I may, just to acknowledge that we do have a number of members leaving us at this election, as they are not seeking re-election. So if I may, Chair, with your indulgence, say a little bit about each member. Firstly, Councillor Gloria Tanner, who's served the community of Mynydd since 2012, and those who know Gloria will know that she's been a real campaigner, specifically on animal rights, but has served on a number of committees, scrutiny committees and others in her time at Swansea Council, and we will be sorry to see Gloria go. Likewise, Councillor Nick Davis, who served the Uplands community since 2012, and those of you who know Nick know that he was hugely involved in drawing up a new HMO policy for the Uplands community to represent the wishes of the community in Uplands in terms of having a sensitive HMO development. Councillor Peter Jones, who's represented the Sketty ward since 2017. And of course, everyone will know Peter's passion for the natural environment and obviously his involvement as chair of the National Environment Scrutiny Committee. Councillor Paulette Smith, who's represented the community of Clive since 2008, and Paulette has held a number of roles, including chairs of the policy development committees, and also represented the council on a number of outside bodies. Councillor Mary Sherwood, who's represented the Uplands ward since 2017, who is also a former cabinet member for Better Communities, and also Mary took up the role as the equalities lead for the WLGA, and obviously fetched us that really important policy which has now been adopted by councils across Wales in terms of promoting equalities across local government. Also, Councillor Will Evans. Will has served the community of Kingsbridge since 2008. Will is a former cabinet member, taking on many roles, including that of education cabinet member and also cabinet member for poverty, where Will made huge impacts in both of those roles, taking forward policy initiatives. Councillor Jennifer Rayner, who's represented the ward of Dunvan since 2012, and again Jen followed Will as cabinet member for education, and you'll know that Jen became education, life learning and skills cabinet member until her retirement from the cabinet recently, and Jen oversaw the delivery of a large part of our Band B schools programme, as well as significant achievements in the education directorate. Councillor Mark Thomas, who's represented the ward of Plenclough since 2012 and has also taken up the role of cabinet member for environment services for many years. That is, as many members will know, probably the busiest cabinet portfolio after leader, in that everybody needs Mark's time to get issues resolved in their wards, and Mark has done an outstanding job in terms of making sure he responds to everything the members send him, and has been an outstanding cabinet member in that respect. Moving on then to Councillor Clive Lloyd, who's represented the St Thomas ward since 2012. Clive has held many roles, has been a great advocate of his community, but also is chair of the pension fund, managing a fund of up to £3 billion, is also the WPP chair, managing pension funds across Wales, is a former cabinet member for finance and performance, and also, of course, an outstanding former deputy leader of the council. And Clive, again, has made a dramatic impact on the lives of the people of the communities of Swansea. Councillor Christine Richards, who's represented the Lower Lougher ward since 2008. I had the pleasure of working with Christine back in DVLA, but also had the pleasure of working with Christine as cabinet member for Children's Services, where again Christine's passion absolutely shone through for improving children's services, and she made a real difference to that portfolio. And of course, again, Christine served with distinction as a deputy leader of this authority. Mark Childs, who served the West Cross community since 1999. Mark has served in a number of cabinet positions, but has also recently served as cabinet member for social care. He obviously stood down from the cabinet for a period so that he could take up the Lord Mayor's position between 2020 and 21. Mark obviously had to deal with the issues of the pandemic as Lord Mayor, in terms of not being able to undertake the duties as he would have liked, but again has made an impact in all of the cabinet roles that he's held. And again, Councillor Clive Lloyd, very grateful again for Councillor Clive Lloyd stepping in to take up the role of cabinet member for social care during the pandemic and steering the ship very, very steadily through that time. Councillor June Burtonshaw, who has represented the ward of Penderry for many years, but has been a representative on both Swansea City Council and the City and County of Swansea Council, serving so far for a total of 39 years, and a remarkable achievement. And June has held a number of roles in that time, June was recently cabinet member for Better Communities, but of course prior to that held several roles in the authority, and of course was a Lord Mayor of this authority between 2002 and 2003. And again, June, huge public service over 39 years. Far too many highlights for me to mention tonight to do you justice, but you have made a significant difference to the people of Swansea. And then finally, Chair, if I can turn to you, who represented West Cross for many years, but of course you've served on a number of authorities: the Borough Council, the Swansea City Council, West Glamorgan County Council and the City and County of Swansea. And totaling it up, I make it a total of 48 years you've served, which is an over and above what anybody would usually do for public services. In that time, you've held a number of roles. Obviously, proudest moment, I guess, would be being Lord Mayor between 1996 and 1997. But of course, you've also served with distinction as presiding member in recent years, and we're grateful, Des, for the way in which you've kept us all in order, but also made sure that you represented this authority with utter distinction over that time. And again, together with the colleagues that I've mentioned, you will all be a very sad loss to this council after you depart at the end of this term. I know there are 4 other councillors who will not be returning, and those are Councillor Linda Tyler-Lloyd, who served Mayo since 2012, Councillor Miles Langston, who served since 2017, Councillor Irene Mann, who served Uplands since 2017, and Councillor Gareth Sullivan, who served Llangafelach on both the Llanw Valley Borough Council and the City and County of Swansea for many years. But I will leave it to the group leaders of the respective groups to say more about those councillors, Chair, with your indulgence.
Thank you, Leader. Got Councillor Lyndon Jones. Sorry, Councillor Chris Holly first. Sorry, Chris.
Oh, no problem at all, Presiding Member. Obviously, I'd like to pay tribute to Gareth and also to Carol, because she hasn't been that well, and Gareth has had is enough to put up with on his own. So she's putting up with him and not being very well. It's been a mammoth task. Gareth has been a cabinet member. He's been on the council. Well, he started a community council actually in his area, an association back in the early 80s, and he's been on the council ever since. But the one thing I think that is quite unique, and I haven't done, I'm sure somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but what is quite unique is that Gareth in 1999 stood against someone and obviously won his seat, and also that person that he beat, the Labour candidate he beat, both of them have been Lord Mayors, and that is Councillor Phil Downing. And I think that's a quite unique accolade to put before you, Gareth. You've been a great servant for Llangafelach and to Cork Village and the area around there. And I look forward. I'm sure you'll have a great retirement down in that caravan of yours, and both have long and healthy lives. But if I may also, Presiding Member, say congratulations to yourself and Councillor Finn Burtonshaw, who I've known for many years, and I hope you have a long and happy retirement. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Councillor Lyndon Jones. Lyndon.
Thank you, Presiding Member. Could I start by also thanking the Labour councillors for their public service and the other councillors who are leaving the council, because obviously listening to Rob, you've served well over many years. We haven't always agreed on some things, but you've given great service to Swansea. I'd like to pay tribute to Councillor Linda Tyler-Lloyd, who's represented the Mayo since 2012, and to Councillor Miles Langston, who's represented Oystermouth since 2017. They both served on quite a few committees of council or in that time, and Miles has acted as my deputy as well. So I'd like to personally thank them for their help and also the work that they've done for their communities. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lyndon. Councillor Peter May. Peter.
Thank you, presiding member. I'd like to firstly echo the sentiments of the leaders of the other political groups in wishing all the councillors well in their retirement, and obviously they've all made very substantial contributions to our city over the time. Coming on to the councillor from my own group, Councillor Irene Mann, universally liked across the chamber, as well. In the short-term space of time that she's been in the chamber, she has contributed quite a few precedents from the Uplands ward that have actually been reverberating around the city. For example, we talk about her remembrance benches, which are now a feature citywide. We also talk about Irene's achievement in managing to get agreement from British Telecom to paint their utility boxes, and many councillors across the city have now benefited from Irene's initiative, all which have generated from our Uplands ward. She's very passionate about selling the Uplands in a positive light, and I think after her term the ward has been a much better place. She's been passionate, as myself, about basic services and cleanliness in the ward. Often seen herself physically with her blue bag and litter picker, and of later times her dog too accompanying her on her various litter picks. Also, she's I know has been formed an excellent rapport with all of the cleansing department officers as well. Has wonderful links with, and was very passionate about conservation, working well with officers for the conservation area, and very passionate about any compliance issues there, and has also in that chaired the Finoni Conservation Society in our Uplands ward. So to sum it up, I think that the chamber is going to be a poorer place without Irene, because in only one term she has contributed so much, both to the Uplands ward and the city as well, and we will miss her.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you for those kind words. I'm sure they're appreciated by all the retiring members. Okay, does that conclude your remarks, Leader?
It does. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, item 6 then, public questions. There are none. Item 7, on to admission arrangements. Call on Councillor Robert Smith. Robert.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I would like to formally move the report. It sets out the processes by which we will be admitting children to schools in Swansea, the criteria that we will be working to, the criteria that will be applied, and also the number set for each school in Swansea. So I formally move the report.
Thank you, Robert. Is that seconded? Leader, are you seconded?
Yes, absolutely, Chair.
Okay, there is no one indicating for questions, so the recommendations are on page 3 of the agenda. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 recommendations there. Can Mr. Evans take the vote, please?
Thank you, presiding member. The vote has been launched. I'm aware that some people are unable to vote, so I'll take the verbal vote. So Councillor Will Evans.
Approve.
That's 4, yeah?
Yeah. Well.
Councillor Gordon Walker.
4.
Councillor Mike Lewis.
4.
Councillor Wendy Lewis.
4.
Councillor Hannah Lawson.
4.
Any other councillors unable to vote, or Councillor Kelly Roberts?
4.
Councillor Paulette Smith.
4.
Are there any other councillors unable to vote electronically? No, we've done that. Okay, I shall look to close the poll. And that is all bar 1 is voting for. 1 abstention.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Evans. Item 8 on the agenda is the appointment of lay members of the Governance and Audit Committee, and I call on the Deputy Chief Executive, Adam Hill. Adam.
Thank you, Presiding Member. As the Council will recall, the Local Government and Election Wales Act 2021 requires additional lay members to be appointed to the Governance and Audit Committee. Up to a third of the committee's membership can be lay members. After advertising the opportunities in January 2022, a recruitment and selection process was undertaken during February and March. Of the 5 applicants, 2 were successful in demonstrating the appropriate skills, knowledge and experience and met the threshold to be recommended for appointment. A further recruitment process will now be undertaken to recruit the final lay member. It is therefore the recommendation of the Appointments Committee held on the 1st of March 2022 that Gordon Anderson and Phil Sharman be appointed as lay members of the Governance and Audit Committee, with both having a term of office from the 24th of May 2022 until the local government elections in 2027. Through you, Presiding Member, I would therefore ask Council to approve these recommendations and for the report to be moved and seconded. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Do we have a mover, leader?
Happy to move, Chair.
Thank you. Seconder?
Happy to second, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, the recommendations are on page 34. Mr. Evans, take the vote, please.
Thank you, Presiding Member. The vote has been launched. I'll take some verbal votes. Give me a moment. Councillor Hannah Lawson.
For.
Councillor Will Evans.
For.
Councillor Paulette Smith.
For.
Councillor Gordon Walker.
For.
Councillor Yvonne Jardine.
For.
Councillor Mike Lewis.
For.
Are there any other councillors that need to vote verbally? No. I shall look to close the poll then. Sorry about that. Right, I'm closing the poll now. And that again.
Sorry, who? It's Councillor Kelly Roberts here. I'm having some difficulty. I wasn't able to vote.
Okay, so I'll take your vote now just before I close everything.
Yes, 4.
4. Okay. Right, so that vote is all 4 with 1 abstention.
Okay, thank you. Item 9 is the extension of term of office for an independent co-opted lay member of the Governance and Audit Committee, and this is Mr. Evans's report. Hugh, please.
Thank you, Presiding Member. As you can see, it's just looking to extend the term of office of Paula O'Connor for 1 further term of 5-year term ending at the local government elections at 2017. Paula O'Connor is currently the chair of the Governance and Audit Committee. Nothing further to add, Chair.
Okay, thank you. The recommendation is on page 37. So, Mr. Evans, take the vote, please. Sorry, we need a proposer.
Chair, happy to move.
Thank you. And a seconder.
Happy to second.
Thank you. The vote, please.
Thank you, Presiding Member. I think call on the verbal votes to start with. Councillor Will Evans.
For.
Councillor Paulette Smith.
For.
Councillor Yvonne Jardine.
For.
Councillor Gordon Walker.
For.
Councillor Kelly Roberts.
For.
Councillor Hannah Lawson.
For.
Are there any other councillors that need to declare verbally? No. I shall close the poll. Sorry, my computer's jumping. Apologies for this. And that is unanimous 4.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Evans. Okay, item 10 then is the Pension Fund Committee Chair remuneration. And this is Mr. Ben Smith's report. So Ben, please.
Chair, I'm going to leave the meeting. If somebody could call me back in when the item is finished.
Yeah, will do. Thank you, Clive. Okay, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, presiding member. Yes, I will take it now. I can see that Clive, as Councillor Lewis, has left. Yes, you have the recommendations and the report in front of you. There are two recommendations. The first is to recognise the scope and breadth of responsibility of the Pension Fund Committee Chair. And I think the report is very evident in that. And then secondly, the formal recommendation, which is seeking to approve at your discretion to make a payment. As I indicated in my declaration of interest, I am the Section 151 officer for the pension fund and that pension fund has a much wider stakeholder range than just this council. I'm giving you advice today as the Section 151 officer of the council, but I have already given my approval as the pension fund Section 151 officer to the proposal. In terms of turning to the matter in front of you, Section 2 sets out very comprehensively the sheer scale of what is a very large funded scheme and the diverse number of public bodies that are in that fund. And as the leader indicated earlier, that fund is now up to nearly £3 billion of assets. I've been your Section 151 officer for a number of years and I've seen it grow from £2 to nearly £3 billion. So it is not an insignificant function and is a very significant duty on whoever is the chair of the committee. Section 4 sets out an example of a whole raft of things that have required the committee to broaden its strength and depth of things that it considers. Section 5 summarises the IRPW arrangements around prescribing what may be done in terms of senior salaries for principal authorities. And not all authorities are different. We are one of the authorities, it's one of 8 that's got a pension fund and one of 11 that's got an HRA. And in doing some comparison analysis with other authorities, putting it very frankly, we are anomalous. As Section 5.4 makes clear, 3 authorities don't need to make arrangements because they already have a pension fund chair who happens to already be in receipt of a senior salary. The other 4, where that isn't the case, have already made arrangements to pay the equivalent of a senior salary. And the recommendation set out in Section 6.1 as a conclusion, and the recommendation is that if you are so content that you give a suitable discretionary payment for 21-22 for the avoidance of doubt for the whole of 21-22, because we're getting towards the year end and I am able to accommodate that within the pension fund, but more importantly establishes the principle going forward. If the pension fund chair is, if you are so minded, if the pension fund chair is not already in receipt of a senior salary, to be consistent with every other pension fund authority in Wales, it is my view that it is appropriate to recognise the responsibility and breadth of duties to so recommend to you that you consider a discretionary payment as set out in the report. So the recommendations before you are straightforward. There are 2 of them. I will defer to the leader who will ultimately move the report, but I can see a number of members have indicated they wish to ask questions and they may be of a technical nature. So I will pause there, presiding member. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ben. Call the leader then, Rob.
Chair, do you want to give the opportunity for Mr. Smith to answer the technical questions first? I'm assuming there will be some.
Okay, but are you moving the recommendation?
Yeah, I also wanted to make a few comments, if that's okay, Chair.
Yeah, by all means. And it's seconded, I assume?
Yes, I'll second the chair.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Phil Downing then.
Yeah, well, I haven't got a technical question, so I don't know if if anybody else got technical questions, but if I can come back later on.
Are the technical, David Phillips, Councillor David Phillips, is it technical?
I'll ask the question, you can judge whether it's technical.
Okay, go on then.
I can't find it in the report. Can you tell me when this takes effect from?
Yes, to clarify, as I indicated, the report is a little bit abstract and indicates it takes effect in 21-22. For the avoidance of doubt, it would be payable for the whole of 21-22. The duties have been done for the year, and it is my view that that is reasonable given the work has been done and that we are in an anomalous situation. As the Section 151 officer, if I'm honest, I wish that the anomaly had been recognised earlier and addressed earlier, but I equally want to give thanks to my deputy who has done the work on this to identify that it is a matter that I think it is appropriate to consider, and for the avoidance of doubt for the minutes, if you are so minded to approve it, it would apply for the whole of the year, Councillor Phillips. So I think that is a technical question. I'm more than happy to answer it on your behalf.
Just to be clear, we're paying it retrospectively.
That would be correct. It would be paid retrospectively if you so make the decision, which is of interest, clearly, and that's why you've raised the matter, and I do understand that. It is my view the duties have been done. As I say, I wish it had been recognised earlier that we were perhaps anomalous. In previous years, it's been less of an issue because sometimes we have had a pension fund committee chair who has been in receipt of a senior salary, and there's been no need to consider the matter. We're in a different position, and I still think it is on balance the right thing to do when you recognise the scale of the duties and the size of the fund. But I do recognise why you've asked the question, Councillor Phillips, and it's right that that question is asked.
We haven't done this before and paid people retrospectively for a job they started without them.
I think equally we've never been in a position where, because of circumstances, we've been in a position before where the chair of the committee has been in receipt of a senior salary, and I think that is the reason why I still think on balance it is reasonable, but I do understand entirely why you've made that point, Councillor Phillips.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mike Day. Mike, do you have a technical question?
I think it is, yes. Thanks, Presiding Member. Just to confirm or check out an assumption that you're not suggesting any changes in the way in which the Pension Fund Committee Chair will be appointed in future. It will be continuing as in the past. Is that right, Ben?
That is absolutely correct. The Constitution is somewhat silent, so it means that it's for the committee to decide, because it's a Section 101 committee. The committee decides who is the chair. In reality, the committee, who's on the committee, are likely to consider appropriate candidates, and that could be a holder of a senior salary if they were the finance portfolio cabinet holder, as has been the case in some previous instances, or a very long-serving experienced member. But it's certainly the case, Councillor Day, that it is our intention that the committee will continue to elect its chair, as happens with a number of the other committees. It is merely this potential anomaly, this anomaly which has arisen because of where we are, where the current chair and potentially future chairs may not be themselves in receipt of a senior salary. But yes, absolutely, that is the case. And I have conferred with the monitoring officer on that, Councillor Day.
Thank you.
Okay, now then, Phil, do you want to come in now? Councillor Downing?
Yeah, thank you, President Member. Yeah, it's just a case of echoing what Mr. Smith has already said, especially about paragraph 5.4, when we are the only council that do not have a remuneration for the chair of the pension fund. And echo that the work of the chairman over the years, as I've been on the pension fund for a few years now, has really grown and grown. And now I've got to go to the other one where I got to congratulate the present chair, Clive Lloyd, on the amount of work he's put in, especially on the fossil fuel side of it. And as the leader, as I think said earlier on, that the pension fund has gone from, I can remember it being just over £1 billion to now just under 3 billion. So, and I think this is in recognition of the extra work now that the chair puts in, especially as with a member of the Wales Pension Partnership. There's a lot more work involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Leader then, Councillor Rob Stewart.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. A couple of points. I mean, obviously, I support the recommendation that's been made around us coming into line with other authorities and remunerating from the pension fund the chair in order to recompense them for the substantial responsibility they're taking on in managing a £3 billion fund. I just wanted to check something with Mr. Smith, though. That the previous advice I was given on this topic was that it wasn't retrospective, but if that is now revised advice, Mr. Smith, it is appropriate for that to reflect the whole year, then I'm not going to argue with the advice. But my understanding was that it wasn't a retrospective payment and would apply from the time of the decision this evening.
I think that it's unfortunate the way the report was worded. It was capable of being inferred either way, which is why I've drawn your attention to it. And I thank Councillor Phillips for his questions, which have also made it clear it is the intention to apply for the whole of the year for the reasons you've said in terms of equity and anomaly elsewhere. There is no preclusion against it. I recall as a statutory officer, when consulted by the IRPW in previous times, flagging up that not all authorities are identical, and you know, the reality is if you've got additional responsibilities, their view many years ago was the senior salaries were the senior salaries, that's it. But it has become more, it's become more possible to be able to do it with a discretionary payment, as has been evidenced in the other four. So that is the reason for it. And I apologise for the lack of clarity in the report in terms of it was inferred one way. There is no preclusion against it. As you rightly say, the charge is to the fund as a whole. I do get the points that have been raised in terms of whether it's right for it to be retrospective or not, but the work has been done. We are anomalous. I wish it had been captured earlier. It seems to me not fair to not make it backdated for the year because the work has been done, and the whole charge does go to the pension fund. The pension fund committee, which has outside stakeholders represented on it, have also approved the report on the same basis, and that gives me comfort. I am satisfied that it is reasonable when you consider it's a fund that's worth £3 billion, that it is reasonable to do so. But I think you're absolutely right that the councillors have asked the questions to be clear what they're being asked to consider, and rightly flag that it is different in this case, but we find ourselves in an anomaly. And I thank Mr. Dong for having done the work and pointing that out. It is a matter for members to decide. I think it is the right and fair thing to do, but I do recognise the comments that have been made by others and entirely why they have been made. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Smith. It was proposed and seconded. Mr. Evans, will you take the vote, please?
Thank you, Presiding Member. The vote has been launched. Okay, I know there's a few that wish to vote verbally, so I'll start with Councillor Will Evans.
For.
Councillor Paulette Smith.
For.
Councillor Yvonne Jardine.
For.
Are there any other councillors that need to vote verbally? Councillor Gordon Walker.
For.
I've got nobody else indicating. Oh, sorry, Hannah Lawson.
For.
Right. Are there any others? No. I shall look to close the poll then. Right. That the majority are for, with some against and some abstentions. But the majority is very much for. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Item 11 is a review of the Councillor's Handbook. Mr. Evans, I understand, it's your report.
Sorry, everybody, just flick to the right page. Okay, if you recall, Council at its last meeting reviewed sections A through to C of the handbook. This is the final section of the handbook that needed reviewing. The Democratic Services Committee considered the matter at its meeting on the 14th of February and took on board the advice that I gave to try and align our role descriptions and person specifications with those set out by the WLGA. So this report deals with that element, but it also keeps a few additional person specs and JDs that the WLGA don't have, and it also seeks to keep them aligned should the WLGA need to amend or update the JDs and person specs. This is a very useful document to help new chairs, new councillors, or anybody just have an idea of what their role is meant to be in those positions. So a very useful document. I ask you to consider adopting it as outlined in recommendations 1 and 2 of the report. Thank you very much.
I'll move then.
Chair, if we called Clive back in.
Yes, presiding member, that was the same point I was going to make, so apologies. I wasn't sure that I could see he had been called back in.
A very good point. Call Clive back in.
Sorry, I thought he might be asking me awkward questions, so I left him in the wilderness. Apologies. Yeah, I'm calling him. Right, he is now in the meeting.
Okay, I understand Councillor Lloyd is back in. Thank you. That item was carried, Councillor Lloyd, for your information. We're now on to item 11 on our agenda, review of the Councillor's Handbook. Mr. Evans has outlined it. There are recommendations on page 49. Is somebody proposing the recommendation?
I will. I'd like to move that we accept the recommendations.
Thank you. And is it seconded?
I'm happy to second.
Thank you. There is nobody indicating. Yes, there is. Are you going to ask a question, Linda, or make a?
No, I've just spoken.
Okay, I shall launch the vote. The vote is launched. And I shall take some verbal votes. Councillor Will Evans.
For.
Councillor Paulette Smith.
For.
Councillor Wendy Lewis.
For.
Councillor Yvonne Jardine.
For.
Councillor Gordon Walker.
For.
Councillor Hannah Lawson.
For.
Are there any councillors that still need to declare verbally? No. I shall look to close the poll. And that is majority for, with a few abstentions. Nobody voting against. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. And on to the penultimate item tonight is item 12, the amendments to the council constitution. So I call on the monitoring officer, Tracy Meredith, please. Tracy.
Yes, thank you, presiding member. This is indeed the last report of tonight's council. It is a for information report, so it doesn't require a vote. It's amendments to the Constitution, Article 12, which relates to officers' functions. These changes are being made for two reasons. Firstly, they are being made under the Local Government and Elections Wales Act. Those changes relate to us not having a head of paid service any longer. That will now be termed a chief executive. And also there are some additional functions inserted under the Local Government and Elections Wales Act for the chief exec, which are reflected in the Article 12. Secondly, there are changes made as a result of the senior management restructure, which have been going through. You will recall that we now have a director of finance appointed. I've also included several additional roles and responsibilities in terms of his functions. We also have the redesignation of the director of resources to the director of corporate services, and we have the addition of the head of vulnerable services in the education directorate. So I have delegated authority and power to make those changes. Those changes will be made to the Constitution, and hence that's why it's a for information report being brought here to Council, just to reflect those changes that will be made.
Thank you very much. There are no questions. That is for information. And as you can see, this evening.
On mute.
Okay, that takes us to the final item. Can you all go on? Can you go on mute, please? That's better. Okay. As you can see, the final item on our agenda is councillors' questions, but for the first and last time, I think that's in my experience, there are no councillors' questions this evening, so that concludes our agenda. It just leaves me to say I wish you all well in your deliberations for the future and for the benefit of the citizens of our authority and of course your local areas. So thank you all for your friendship over the years, and I declare this meeting closed. Thank you very much. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you very much. Survive.
Thank you. Bye.